From a glitzy feature set in the New York Jazz Age to a young adult dystopian franchise left in limbo, these are the worst movie adaptations that flopped. Everyone knows that Hollywood loves to bring the stories from our favorite books to the big screen. Sometimes they do a great job, and other times, well, not so much. Over the years, there have been a ton of books that didn't exactly make a great jump from page to screen. But it seems like every year there are more and more adaptations, and even the most classic works of literature are never safe.
The future belongs to those who know where they belong.
In 1925, American author F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby. It's regarded as one of the best works of fiction of all time. But Fitzgerald probably never thought his little book would become so popular. And he definitely never thought it would get made into another big-budget film over 80 years later. With an all-star cast that included Leonardo DiCaprio, Carey Mulligan, and Tobey Maguire, The Great Gatsby hit theaters in 2013. But despite all of its glitz and glam, audiences weren't completely wowed by all it had to offer. The source material is so beloved, and some people felt the film focused too much on CGI and the flashiness of the Roaring Twenties, straying too far from the heart of the novel. The book is one of the greatest American tragedies ever written, but the importance of that gets lost in director Baz Luhrmann's signature style of overly cinematic camera movements and dazzling sparkle. The cast performances are subpar, and no matter how hard the film tries, no amount of jazzy music and bright lights can make up for that. Christopher Orr, a writer for The Atlantic, said of the film, "The problem is that when the movie is entertaining, it's not Gatsby, and when it's Gatsby, it's not entertaining." Luckily, The Great Gatsby was a standalone novel, but the Percy Jackson series had plenty more for Hollywood creatives to work with. The Percy Jackson and the Olympians books are a beloved fantasy series, and given their descriptive and exciting take on Greek mythology, the book seemed ripe for adaptation. Despite the series having 5 books, only 2 movies were made. The adaptations were so poorly done that even the author of the books, Rick Riordan, spoke out about how bad he thought they were. He told his Twitter followers, "It's my life's work going through a meat grinder when I pleaded with them not to do it." The film changed major aspects of plot lines, character personalities, their relationships to one another, and their ages. In the books, the kids are 11, 12 years old, but in The Lightning Thief, the characters have jumped up to 15 and 16 years old. One of the biggest changes was to Percy himself, who was much less compelling on screen than he is in the books, and true fans did not love it. Plot changes are unavoidable when adapting books for film, but the Percy Jackson movie adapted too much, nearly rewriting the whole story. Riordan made it known that despite being the author, he had little influence on the production of the films, and it meant the story was changed in big ways that he and his fans didn't agree with. For a YA series, it's easily one of the most underwhelming adaptations, but maybe the upcoming Disney Plus series based on the books can make up for where the 2 movie adaptations failed. Some authors have plenty of their books adapted, like Stephen King, who's seen many of his novels make a jump to the silver screen over the years. Many adaptations have been big success stories like The Shining and Shawshank Redemption, but his series, The Dark Tower, does not rank highly on the list of his well-adapted works. Given King's series had 8 novels, it's surprising that there was only 1 film in 2017. The film's box office earnings didn't even double its budget, and critics were quick to call it boring and flavorless. Audiences who were fans of the novels felt the movie was too simple compared to the source material. With 8 books to work with, it seems the filmmakers were a bit lazy. The film featured big names like Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey, but the stars on the screen couldn't mask how bad it was. King admitted to Entertainment Weekly that the studio making the film PG-13 meant the story lost some of its toughness. The author also believes that because the film basically picks up in the middle of the series, the plot was confusing to follow. And
So you wanted me to face you, old friend? Here I am.
And viewers were left pretty puzzled. As some of the most commonly adapted stories, they're also some of the worst. Like the 2006 film Aragon, based on the 2002 novel written by Christopher Paolini, who was just 15 when he started writing it. The adaptation lacked the same sort of magic the novel had, and The Hollywood Reporter said it didn't have a whole lot of depth. The film received a widespread negative response and was criticized for everything from acting, the performances, the screenplay, and its unfaithfulness to the original story. A film critic for the New York Times said at the time of the film's theatrical release, Aragon is what happens when misguided studio executives option a novel written by a teenager. And many other media outlets went so far as to describe the film as lifeless and generic. The film also came along just a few years after the ultra-successful first two films in the Lord of the Rings franchise. So there was a clear opportunity to make some money by capitalizing on the popularity of the genre. As hard as Aragon tried, it just couldn't capture the same lightning-in-a-bottle magic that the Tolkien adaptations were able to. In the mid-2010s, the YA dystopian genre was easily the star of the show in theaters. The Hunger Games was a massive hit, and Lionsgate wanted to build on it. Enter the Divergent series. The 2011 series by Victoria Roth was first adapted for the screen in 2014, but trying to piggyback off the success of another book might not have been the best idea. The Divergent series was supposed to be the next YA film franchise, and the studio that brought us the Hunger Games and Twilight films believed it would be their next big moneymaker. That didn't exactly pan out. The source material was never as strong as its fellow dystopian series, so the films had a weak starting point. This proved to be a fatal flaw for the franchise, which, like Twilight and Hunger Games, chose to split its final book into two movies. But this didn't work for Divergent and part one of its finale. What ended up being the last of the series that audiences ever got to see was widely criticized for a lack of originality, character advancements, visual effects, and plot. Even the cast and crew didn't like the movie. Shailene Woodley, the star of all three adaptations, admitted that making the film was a struggle. The experience was so awful that she almost quit acting because of it. On the Armchair Expert podcast, Woodley confessed, "The story really kind of got lost, and nobody really knew what we were doing anymore." Yeah, that checks out. Audiences and critics felt the exact same way. The franchise bombed so badly that things came to a grinding halt, and the final film was totally scrapped. The only problem is this cancellation left the story on a major cliffhanger, and the choice just made already disappointed fans more disappointed. A poor performance at the box office for Allegiant Part 1 and a cast that hated the movie pretty much killed the franchise. The least the studio could have done was wrap things up somehow, right? Well, they tried. There were rumors that the series could make the jump to TV someday, but the main cast members have said they're not interested. Woodley herself even said, "I didn't sign up to be in a television show." Sadly, it looks like Divergent will always be a kind of what-if story. And if all these movies taught us anything, it's that Hollywood needs to learn that sometimes a story should really stay on the page. So there you have it, ladies and gents. From a glitzy feature set in the New York Jazz Age to a young adult dystopian franchise left in limbo, those were the worst movie adaptations that flopped.